Hi, welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about a new decree signed by President Putin that I think tells us something extremely important about the current state of the war in Ukraine, because Russia is now offering to wipe out huge amounts of debt for people willing to sign up and fight. When I first read this story, it actually reminded me of the hit TV show Squid Game that you may have watched on Netflix. In that show, people who are drowning in financial problems are offered life-changing financial rewards in exchange for entering an extremely dangerous situation where their survival is uncertain. But this situation isn't Netflix, this is real life in Russia in 2026. So let's picture the situation. You're struggling financially, your debts have gone to court, collectors are chasing you, your mortgage payments are behind, your car could be repossessed, you can't really see a way out. And then the Russian government comes along and says, if you sign a military contract for 1 year, go and fight in Ukraine, and we will wipe out up to 10 million rubles of debt. And not just your debt, potentially your spouse's debt as well. Now, in terms of how much is 10 million rubles, that's around $140,000 at current rates. And if we're looking at what 10 million rubles can buy you in Russia, it's roughly the price of a small studio apartment in Moscow. That's around 35 square meters or 380 square feet if you work in feet. So it's a tiny apartment in the city centre. And that is effectively the amount Russia is prepared to spend just to attract one new recruit. Now, before we go on any further today and get into the details of all of this, could I ask anybody that hasn't subscribed yet to please hit that subscriber button? It really does help me with the algorithm. I'm also looking to build my subscriber numbers. So if you could do that, it would be fantastic and it definitely would put a smile on my face. Also wanted to mention that the competition where you can win my property or a cash alternative prize is now close to its conclusion. So if you haven't got involved yet, now's the time to do it. I'm offering some really good deals. You can either scan the QR code on the screen now if you know how to do that, or if not, click the link in the description below. It'll take you straight through to the company that's running that competition for me. Now let's talk about exactly what's happened. On the 26th of May, the Kremlin announced that President Putin had signed a new decree providing debt relief to anyone signing a contract with the Russian Defense Ministry as of the 1st of May, so it's backdated. The contract has to be for at least 1 year, and importantly, this debt relief only applies to debts that have already reached the legal collection stage before signing up. So that detail matters because this is not aimed at wealthy Russians. This is specifically targeting people in serious financial trouble. People who may feel trapped, people with court claims against them, people who may not have any alternatives left. And on the very same day President Putin signed this, another decree extending rental rights for state-owned land was also signed for anybody fighting in Ukraine. So this is no longer simply about military pay. Russia is building an entire financial support system around military recruitment. And here's the really important part. This is not actually new. Russia already introduced a similar debt relief program back in 2024. So the fact that the Kremlin is now refreshing and expanding the scheme again in 2026 tells us something important. Russia desperately needs new recruits for the war, because if the country was overflowing with willing volunteers who would not need giant sign-on bonuses, debt cancellation programs, land extension rights, and increasingly aggressive financial incentives, then Russia wouldn't be doing it. But Russia is simply trying to buy manpower. And when you look at the full recruitment package now being offered, the scale of it is actually quite extraordinary. First of all, there are sign-on bonuses. The federal government guarantees a minimum upfront payment of around 400,000 rubles. That's around 4,500 US dollars. But that's just the starting point. Regional governments then add on top their own incentives, and some of these packages are enormous. Certain regions have reportedly offered between 2 and 3 million rubles simply for signing a contract. In Siberia, one package was reportedly up to 3.4 million rubles, more than $40,000 just for joining the military. That's a big number. And according to Russian economic analysts, the average sign-on bonus across Russia earlier this year was around 1.5 million rubles. So that's around $17,000 up front. Then there's the monthly salary. Contract soldiers are reportedly earning up to 250,000 rubles a month, which is around $3,000. Now that might not sound enormous by Western standards, But in Russia, especially in poorer regions, that is very high pay. In many parts of the country, it's more than double the average wage. And that creates another major economic problem because the military is now competing directly with civilian economy for workers. In normal economies, governments try to attract people into productive sectors: manufacturing, technology, engineering, construction. But in Russia, one of the best paying jobs available for many people right now is to go and fight in the war in Ukraine. And that pulls workers away from civilian industries. It pushes wages higher, it worsens labour shortages, and it feeds inflationary pressures across the economy. Then there are the injury and death payments. The family of a soldier killed after roughly 1 year of service will potentially receive around 14.5 million rubles in combined compensation, salary and benefits. That's around about $150,000. And the grim conclusion of all of this is that a man going to war and being killed could actually become more financially viable for the family than in working his job for the rest of his life. Now just think about that for a second. That's how distorted this system has become. Then there are the education benefits: tax exemptions, preferential university access, support for families, housing related support, land right extensions, and of course prison pardons, because Russia has recruited tens of thousands of prisoners during the war, offering freedom in exchange for military service. So when you add all of this together, you start to realise the sheer scale of the recruitment machine Russia has built. This is no longer just military recruitment, it's effectively a wartime welfare system tied directly to combat service. And the reason for all of this is obvious. Russia needs men, a lot of men. Western estimates suggest that Russia needs to recruit up to 35,000 new soldiers every single month simply to sustain the war effort. Not necessarily to launch huge offensives, not necessarily to achieve dramatic breakthroughs, but simply to replace losses. And those losses are staggering. Russia does not publish reliable casualty figures, but Western intelligence agencies, military analysts and research organisations have all produced estimates. CSIS have estimated 1.2 million Russian casualties by the end of 2025, including around 325,000 estimated to have been killed. The UK Ministry of Defence has produced similar estimates. Former CIA Director William Burns has also referred to losses exceeding 1 million, and Ukraine's military claims even higher figures. Now obviously wartime casualty figures are always disputed, but regardless of which estimate you choose, the conclusion is the same. Russia has suffered enormous manpower losses, potentially the largest sustained military losses by a major power since the Second World War. And that explains why recruitment incentives keep getting larger, because the numbers increasingly add up. Russia reportedly recruited around 450,000 contract soldiers during 2024, but analysts believe recruitment slowed in 25 despite the increasing financial incentives. Some estimates suggest recruitment rates have fallen from over 1,100 recruits per day to less than 1,000. Now that might not sound like a huge difference, but over the course of a year it becomes massive. And if recruitment falls too far below losses, Russia risks losing its numerical advantage on the battlefield. That's why these programs matter. That's why the Kremlin keeps expanding the incentives. And that's why I think this latest decree tells us something important. President Putin does not want another large-scale mobilisation. The 2022 mobilisation caused panic across Russia. Hundreds of thousands of military-aged men fled the country. Public anger rose sharply. So instead of forcing people into the army again, Russia appears to be trying to financially tempt people in by signing up. But the word voluntary becomes complicated when somebody is drowning in debt, when court orders are already being issued against them, when they have no savings, no future prospects, no obvious way out financially. At that point, this stops looking like patriotic recruitment and starts looking much more like economic desperation. And the costs involved are becoming extraordinary. Russia's already massively increased military spending. Military expenditure is now around 7% of GDP. And analysts estimate Russia could spend more than $10 billion this year on recruitment bonuses alone. And that's before the salaries and the death payments, before disability compensation, before education benefits, before debt cancellation, before housing support, before land rights extensions. the true financial cost of sustaining this manpower system is becoming enormous. And that matters economically because Russia is already dealing with high inflation, labour shortages, elevated interest rates, and increasing pressure on regional government finances. In fact, some Russian regions have reportedly already reduced death compensation payments because local budgets are coming under strain. So the financial pressure is now spreading through the entire system. And I think this is the key takeaway from today's story. The bonuses are getting bigger, the benefits are expanding, the decrees keep coming, and yet Russia still needs tens of thousands of new recruits every month. That tells us something important. The Kremlin is no longer relying purely on patriotism, it's increasingly relying on financial desperation. Russia is now offering debt relief worth the price of a Moscow apartment to attract recruits into one of the deadliest conflicts in the world. I think that tells you a lot about the true state of the war. So hopefully you found today's video useful, informative, and most importantly, thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already.